Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode number 98. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Friday. Dave, we had said on the Wednesday show this might be the calm before the storm. Turned out it's just storm before the storm. So hopefully the hatches are battened and we're ready for this Russell Wilson story and everything else that's happening here in Pittsburgh. So no free agency is not official yet, not until the tampering period on Monday, but there's already just a wave of new news.
Yeah, it's incredible. And we have reached salt at airport season. Just a sidebar. We kind of looking ahead to this week. Last week, you had a fantastic week on the site and the podcast and all like that. And kind of let the guys know in our Discord channel, hey, you guys probably got to be a little bit more creative this coming week. It might be a little bit slower. Wrong. It's been crazy. It's been a crazy offseason so far. The NFL does a fantastic job, as we've stated several times, of structuring the annual calendar, where you go from one thing into the next thing, and it really has seemed like it's been nonstop since the season ended. So with that, it is Russell Wilson season. And why don't you tell the people what are spotted at airport season, and specifically Russell Wilson. So explain to the people what that means.
Russell Wilson, let's fly. He is apparently wheels up right now en route to Pittsburgh. Ian Rappaport just tweeted another photo of Wilson on a plane, and so he is flying to Pittsburgh. And yeah, just a quick sidebar. A little bit later, we'll have a combine roundtable with Joe Clark, Ross McCorkle, Jonathan Heitritter, get their perspective on what happened at Indy. I know that feels like an eternity ago just based on where things are at. But to recap, Russell Wilson, first reported by the Post-Gazette's Jerry Dulac on Thursday afternoon that Pittsburgh had interest in Wilson. The two sides plan to meet at some point ahead of free agency. Again, legal tampering period begins Monday. New league year begins Wednesday, although Wilson has been given permission by the Broncos to meet with other teams. Will be officially released when the new league year starts. And so reporting coming out this morning is that Wilson met with the Giants, and now he's en route to Pittsburgh to meet with Mike Tomlin, the front office, sometime within the next 24 hours. Also reported meetings potentially coming up with the Raiders and maybe other clubs as well. So Pittsburgh, not the only team in the mix, but they certainly are one of the teams in the mix. So that's the lay of the land right now. We can take this thing in 50 different ways in terms of contract, competition, what it means for Kenny Pickett, etc. What are your initial thoughts, Dave?
My initial thoughts is they've got three quarterback spots to fill on this roster right now. When is the last time this team went this late into this far into an offseason with just one quarterback under contract? I tried to research that the other day and came up empty, trying to find out the last time that has actually happened there. But look, this goes back to what we've stated since last season ended. This team's got to get better quarterback play in 2024 if they're going to not only make the playoffs, but win a playoff game and try to compete for, make some sort of run there. Whatever that ends up looking like, you have to be in favor of. Obviously, since last season ended, there's been all these names. It's, go from Justin Fields to Kirk Cousins to Russell Wilson to Ryan Tannehill to who else has been bantered about there, Alex? I mean, the Jimmy Garoppolo's name's been thrown out there. Obviously, Mason Rudolph potentially coming back. On the flip side, the Steelers, if you believe them from what they've said, basically since late, end of the season on into this offseason, they have full confidence in Kenny Pickett. Everything that's kind of come out of their mouths would lend to the fact that they want competition for Kenny Pickett. But I tell you, if you look at, guys specifically like Russell Wilson, it's hard to imagine, even if he comes in on a minimum veteran salary, it's just so hard to envision them trying to frame with a straight face that this is a competition with Kenny Pickett.
That was one of my first initial thoughts, and the team may frame it that way. I don't know, and that's a bridge we can cross if it ends up happening, if Wilson ends up signing. But my thought would be, if Wilson were to sign in Pittsburgh, he's not going to do that without at least good confidence he's going to start. I don't think he wants to end his career holding the clipboard, the way that it ended in Denver last year. He's never been a backup in his career, sans that, ending in Denver last season. My interpretation of this, and I've been all over the place in terms of quarterback. I didn't think they would go after and really explore big names like this, but it is a unique opportunity because it's a guy with a ton of experience, production, a ring, which is important in some respect. And because of the contract situation in Denver, he is going to be the cheapest option out there. Now, I'm still skeptical he'll sign for the minimum, the way that many people have speculated, but he's not going to cost a lot, no matter what that number is. And so I think for Pittsburgh, there is a chance to get a quarterback at a pretty low number overall that has the resume that he has. And if Pittsburgh's thought is, if Wilson can come in, and even though his play, I think, is declining and probably will continue to slide, but if he can come in and throw you 20 touchdowns in 2024, that's just production that you just haven't seen the last 2 years for this passing game. And if you can do that, and with a good run game and good defense, that would be the thing that gets you over the hump to win a playoff game, which I think is really the source of angst and anxiety in that building, because it's been so long since they have won in the postseason.
If there is something to look forward to a guy like Russell Wilson potentially being the quarterback in Pittsburgh in 2024, it would be related, I think, to his red zone play. Mostly, this is a guy that really, I think, for the most part, because of his size and the way he plays, not a middle of the field guy. So much as far as in between the 20s and all like that, still was able to complete a fairly decent amount of passes, more than 20 yards down the field last season. So there is that, a guy that, even though despite his age, still has some mobility to him. Look, you know how I like to measure these quarterbacks when it's all said and done, adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat. And over the last 2 years, for the quarterbacks that have attempted at least 500 pass attempts, he's only slightly better than both Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields, the other quarterback that obviously we've talked about a lot within this. However, he is better than both of them in that stat. It's still under 6, Alex, but it is better than Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields. And look, at least his interceptions were down. Last season, what did he have? Like 8 of those last season. I think 20 of his. How many touchdowns did he have last year?
26.
26. I think 20 of the 26 touchdown passes that he had last year were in the red zone. So there is that. If you did bring him in, you would obviously want to attach him to a strong running game. He would be a guy that you wouldn't want in a situation to have to throw and drop back 40 times a game. Really, any quarterback that comes in Pittsburgh right now, at this point, you wouldn't expect to be put in that situation. It just goes back to, you got to get better quarterback play, Alex, and no matter who that person is, that's got to be the goal. Coming out of this offseason here. And look, you hit on something that's been kind of a hot button with me as well too. I have been curious since the whole look, we've known for a while Russell Wilson's was going to get released from the Broncos. All that writing was on the wall going back to late last season when he was asked to remove his injury guarantee, and then he refused to do so, and then he got benched. And make no mistake, that's why Russell Wilson got benched, right? For no other reason.
Correct. I mean, it was essentially that.
All right. And one of the things I'm interested to see if he actually, nobody understands offsets more than I do. I get it. Within that though, I have kind of wondered how Russell Wilson turning around and signing for the vet minimum would look league wide. And I finally got around to asking Joel Corey, former NFL agent, about this. And this is what I asked him specifically. I said, I'm curious to how you think the NFLPA and his agent, for that matter, might feel if Wilson were to indeed sign for the vet minimum because of the offsets. I said, do you really think it is in his best interest to do such? Pretty point blank question there. And Joel finally got back to me, and he says, yes. It expands the number of potential suitors with a starting quarterback job. He says Russell Wilson is making $39 million in 2024, regardless of what he gets from another team. Every dollar above his league minimum is more cash and salary cap relief for the Broncos there. So that's, Joe Corey is a former NFL agent, but I think he sees all sides of it, including the NFLPA side. So he seems to think that the reality of Russell Wilson actually signing for the vet minimum, which is right around 1.2 million, is indeed a possibility.
It is, and who am I to disagree with Joel Corey? And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on the financials for a guy that has not even signed yet. We're not even sure where he's going to go and how this thing's going to play out. But my concern about the money was less about the union standpoint. But if you're Russell Wilson, the more that any team that signs you is financially invested in you, the more likely you're going to start and keep your job and keep your spot on the roster. And if it's a 1-year deal, you're talking about value for next year. You sign for the minimum, even given the circumstances. And if you sign for dirt cheap this year, that may impact, I think, your value next year, the way the teams view you if you plan on playing, which I assume Wilson probably does at this point. So that's where I come in on why I think he would sign for more. Now, the point is, though, he's not going to sign for the $40 million that Kirk Cousins will. It's going to be a cheap contract, and that's why I think teams will be interested in him and why Pittsburgh is interested in him. But I think what it comes down to for Wilson is, where can I go where I feel like it's a good place to go, good place to win, but also to start? Because it goes back to your point. Well, I think Pittsburgh would try to frame it as competition. And maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong a lot in this process, but I have a hard time believing Wilson will go to a place where he doesn't feel very confident that he is going to start for that team week 1.
Well, and Omar Khan is, continues to say, even as recent as I think yesterday with a couple of interviews with local media members, that the word competition is continually used. And it look, I understand he's up in age. At some point, veteran starters become backups, generally. It's just so hard to imagine him signing a 1-year deal for the minimum, and then turning around and the Steelers continuing to say it's a competition. We still believe in Kenny, and Russell Wilson, even the words coming out of his mouth, I'm here to compete. All of that's just I'm not saying that it can't happen. It's just, especially with a guy like Russell, for some reason, you just, there's other potential real opening job possibilities around the NFL still at this point. I think the Giants could potentially be one of those options if they part ways with Daniel Jones. Who's going to be the quarterback in Las Vegas for the Raiders? There's still a couple of interesting situations there. Just at its core, it's just hard to envision not so much him signing with the Steelers, just how it would be framed for the rest of the offseason.
And for him, let's say he signs in a couple of days, which sounds like it probably will happen to some team. If he didn't feel like he could get a starting job right now, if I'm him, I'm just waiting and just seeing if something opens up. Somebody gets hurt, some other move happens. You're not going to be hurt financially for taking the minimum.
You're getting paid, right?
Yeah,
you're getting paid. So why would you pigeonhole yourself away? And look, I don't want to one-to-one compare this to what happened to who was the edge rusher a few years ago?
Melvin Ingram.
Yeah, Melvin Ingram. They didn't flat out. It doesn't seem like they flat out came. There was a miscommunication of some sort. Melvin probably thought he was going to have a larger role than what he ended up having there. You would think Russell would want some sense of, am I going to be the starter?
Yeah. What's the plan for me? That has to be a question.
Or is this my job to lose? And how do the Steelers dance around that? And then how do they dance around that publicly?
Well, I think publicly they will say it's a competition if he does sign. And I think they would probably even tell Wilson that. What I think Wilson's logic might be is, okay, I'm told it's a competition.
I'm going to beat him.
But I can beat Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I'm going to beat him. Yeah. You guys frame it however you want to frame it. But
I can beat Kenny. If I can't beat Kenny Pickett, I'm going to go retire somewhere. Like that's going to be his thought process.
Right. And maybe that is line of his thinking. I don't care what Pittsburgh tells me. I'm going to beat him. I know I can beat him.
Yeah, so I think that would be the logic. And again, it is a unique opportunity to get a guy in this situation because it doesn't usually happen at probably what the cost it'll be to sign him. The one thought I got to do a deep dive on Wilson. I'm not going to pretend like I've studied his tape. I know things went sour 2 years ago under Nathaniel Hackett, and his numbers did look good last year in Denver. Just top line, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, good completion percentage. Yards per attempt was low, but we'll take those numbers in a heartbeat in Pittsburgh if you could just copy and paste those over.
Don't turn the football over, for starters. And second, converting into red zone. Once again, make no mistake about it, right? This is going to be built around a running game, heavy personnel, hopefully some play action, a more concise, not independent route type instant, but even so, at its core, Russell Wilson is going to play like Russell Wilson,
right? And that in some ways is the problem. But what I can't get out of my head is Denver released him taking the largest dead money charge in NFL history. Correct? Isn't it like $85 million?
Right. In totality, right.
Sean Payton, a well-respected quarterback guru, head coach, and I know that he wasn't there when they traded for him, but he disliked Russell Wilson's play so much. He thought he was so untenable to be the starting quarterback in 2024 that he took the biggest dead money hit in NFL history just to have Russell Wilson not play for him. That to me says something about where they think his play is at. Now, could he be better in a better system or something? Sure. But I can't shake that thought of they thought he was such a bad quarterback and so, just not going to fit, not going to work for them, that they just took on the largest dead money hit ever for it. They are paying him $39 million to not play for them. And that says something about where they think his talent and his play has drifted towards.
Well, I think it goes back to what I just said. That there are no matter what your scheme is and what you try to do, you can take the Russell Wilson out of Seattle and Denver, but you can't take you can't take the Russell Wilson out of Russell Wilson.
Sure.
So there is some level of his style of play that you are just going to have to work around.
Right. And that seemed to be the issue because Sean Payton's offense is structured and rigid and, progression 1, 2, 3, ABC. Think about Drew Brees. That's what he was, slice and dice you up. Wilson is an out of structure guy. And I think the physical tools are declining, but he's still playing like he's prime Russell Wilson is kind of my overall thought. His snap to throw time is over 3 seconds. It was the third longest in football last year. He was sacked 100 times the last 2 years. If you're going to get Wilson, can you try to help control the in-structure stuff? Can you build up your offensive line even more to help protect him? But he will run himself into trouble and make some mistakes. So again, I got to do the tape watch on him some more, and probably sounds like I'm going to at some point here very soon. But I just think about Peyton saying that we think you're such a bad quarterback that we will pay you $40 million to play for somebody else.
Right. And look, he is older too, right? So even though he still has some level of mobility to it, what does Mike Tomlin keep talking about? Quarterback mobility. Does he have enough of that mobility? And we even heard Arthur Smith in that teach tape, right? Talk about being able to, I think he can still do some of those things about, the moving pocket and
sure. He can boot
out. What do they call pass? What was the term that Arthur
play pass?
Yeah, play pass, and some of those things that Arthur Smith. Mm-hmm. You just have to try to be as rigid as possible with the cores of what you want to do, and not get in a situation too where you're chasing on the scoreboard, which would open up Russell to doing more of the things that Russell does. It gets him in trouble sometimes. And once again, I think from what I have seen and know of Russell on tape, especially last year, I mean, the red zone stuff is attractive, very, very attractive, as is the touchdown per interception ratio. The sacks, not so much, right?
Sure.
But you would have to have a lot of confidence that your running game can be where it needs to be, that it's going to take a lot of the onus off of the passing game.
And I understand, again,
which that's going to be any quarterback
sure,
that plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2024.
It's required. The run game has to be there. Otherwise, this is all moot, and it's not going to go well for Pittsburgh's offense and, by extension, their season. And again, I understand. Listen, Wilson threw 26 touchdowns last year. Pittsburgh has thrown 25 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. So I get from just a baseline level, you just get just normal, quote-unquote, quarterback production. They think they can win with that when they have a good run game and a good defense. It's healthy and adds in this offseason with a good draft class and free agency. And Wilson won't take up a lot of cap space to prevent them from adding more in free agency. I just, the play does seem to be declining overall. And I know that he's probably better than Pickett right now, but to me, those aren't your only 2 options, of Pickett or Wilson. There are other avenues you could explore if you really want to get better. But I guess their mindset is he's the best quarterback that we could sign that would be in some way plausibly framed as competition with Kenny Pickett. And that's the avenue we want to try to explore.
Look, I would applaud anything that helps be a shot at potentially improving the quarterback play once again. Whatever that looks like this offseason. I mentioned with Fields, the conversation we had about him. If for somehow, if they thought that was the guy, then go get him. The good thing about Wilson, especially if he does end up signing for the minimum, it's not an expensive shot.
Right.
All of this just goes. It's not a matter of what direction they go in this point, because we know they're going to add 3 quarterbacks to this room. We know that one of those is likely to be someone who's already played in the NFL more than just a handful of games, right?
Right.
The thing is how does it circle back and fly in the face? Not that it's a huge concern, because words are words. It feels like it would fly in the face of what they've said about Kenny Pickett to this point.
Well, again, I think if they sign him, they're going to say it's competition.
Right.
But what is it really? And the question I was going to ask you is, putting aside the public framing, if Wilson signs, what does it mean for Kenny Pickett?
Means he's the backup to me.
I think so too. And to me, I mean, if you don't play this year and this is supposed to be the prove it year for Kenny Pickett, what is the future of Kenny Pickett?
He ain't getting that 5th-year option picked up if he don't play and play well, So that means, and look, Russell Wilson, that's probably a 1-year fix at best,
Right.
So you're turning around. We're having discussions about the draft class next year, more than likely.
That was my thought in terms of what it means for Kenny Pickett and for this team is if you sign Russell Wilson in a couple of days, you're looking for a quarterback in 2025, either through the vet process again or through the draft. That's what it tells me. I know that's a long ways away and things can and of course will change, but I think Wilson is a 1-year stopgap and I think he will start over Kenny Pickett. And that would really signal the end of Kenny Pickett's future as a potential franchise or starting quarterback in Pittsburgh.
Here's the thing. What does this franchise say every offseason? Our goal is to win the Super Bowl. Right?
Yep. Yes.
And I'm sure every team tries to say the same thing, but they earnestly, I believe at their core, they earnestly believe they go into every offseason thinking we're going to build a team that gives us a legitimate shot at winning a Super Bowl. Does Kenny Pickett give you legitimately take your Steelers gear off, your glasses off, everything? Does Kenny Pickett honestly give you that chance to do that?
No, not as we've seen it right now. The question is, though, does Russell Wilson give you that chance?
I think he gives you a little bit more than a chance than Kenny Pickett does.
But does he give you a chance? I mean, a better chance than Pickett. Yes. I don't think he becomes a Super Bowl contender with Wilson. I think you can win a playoff game. And I think Pittsburgh, they need to do that. And again, they feel that weight of that drought. And that might be driving them to sign somebody like Wilson more than anything right now.
Right. But of all the quarterbacks legitimately that they have a shot to add to this roster this offseason, who potentially gives you the best shot?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question, and you can debate about, okay, does this guy give you a better shot? But there's a larger cost.
It's not Tannehill, right?
No, of course. None of the veteran names that I mentioned in my wish list are getting you to that point. I mean, if you Kirk Cousins, in theory, would probably make you a contender. Now, obviously, there's an extreme cost to that and discussions about age and injury and scheme fit. But, if we're talking about that's the best quarterback available in this free agency process.
Here's the thing. At least Russell Wilson has done it before. There is that factor of it. Now, I'm with you. I don't think that if they sign him that this becomes Super Bowl contenders, baby. But I do think it gives them a better shot of getting into the tournament and at least winning a game. And then obviously, as everyone knows, you get into a tournament, anything can happen, especially if you've got momentum and you're healthy and all those kind of things there. So,
but Pittsburgh has been in the tournament a lot since 2016, and it's not gotten them anywhere. And my concern is they get to the wild card game, maybe they win it. At best, they probably win the wild card game, and they're bouncing the divisional round. Then they sit there and say, okay, now what? What do we do at quarterback?
All right, let me rephrase this. All right, of Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Ryan Tannehill, Mason Rudolph, any quarterback in the draft that you so desire this year, which one gives you the best chance to go furthest into the playoffs?
For 2024?
Yes, for this upcoming season. So once again, it's Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Ryan Tannehill, Mason Rudolph, and any quarterback that you desire in the 2024 NFL draft.
Yeah, well, we'll take off the top quarterback names because there's no chance they get Caleb
But
Williams.
I want to give you the option though.
Okay. I mean, listen, Dave, my whole philosophy is to build through the draft a quarterback. I think if you look at all the contending teams, they get their quarterbacks through the draft, and the teams that are in this kind of middle place are the teams that bounce them veteran to veteran type. But I understand a rookie is going to come with a level of unknown, and you're not going to get Daniels and May, and probably not McCarthy, and certainly not Caleb Williams. To answer the question, I mean, there's no obvious
Wilson.
answer there. You could argue Fields. I mean, there is more. He's in his prime, and there's more upside if you can smooth out the edges in his game. Because I think Wilson will make some of the same mistakes that Fields will. But yeah, I mean, point taken. And I think Pittsburgh's also, their thought is we're in a window where our defense is one of the oldest in football. Hayward's in the last year or two of his career. TJ Watt's about to be 30. Like, we're trying to win right now for these guys because we have a good defense. And if we wait too long and draft and develop, by the time the offense is figured out, the defense now needs fixing because we've lost Hayward and, everyone's older and we're trying to replace that group. So I think Pittsburgh is really trying to maximize the window that they're in right now.
If you do sign Russell Wilson, do you think about trading Kenny?
No, I mean, I had said, if they gone after Fields, you might as well do it. But because of the cost on Wilson, and again, they're going to frame it as competition. If they were to sign Wilson, they're not going to flat out say that we have a starting quarterback in Pickett or Wilson. But I don't think it's going to get to the point where they're going to trade Pickett. But again, if they sign him, to me, this does implicitly mark the beginning of the end of the Kenny Pickett era.
Who would you rather this team go get right now, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields?
Well, I mean, again, 1-to-1. I mean, if you were ranking the quarterbacks and where they're at and where they're going, I would personally take Fields over Wilson. But then there's the cost aspect of it too, in terms of what it'll take to acquire Fields, which we're still a little unsure of what that number would be. Again,
what if this thing turns around that this is a dog and pony show with Russell Wilson to further drive down? Because what's Ryan Poles doing right now?
He's sweating.
He's got to, at least it feels like that trade market's been slowly deteriorating almost by the day since the combine, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has. Yeah, I don't know if it's that. I just go back to what I've said before, and I'll just say it again. I don't think Pittsburgh will become the contender they hope to be until they draft another quarterback.
I agree.
I think that's how you find it. I think it is a good quarterback class this year. If I'm Pittsburgh, I think it's worth entertaining the idea of names that could be in trade up, plausible trade up territory, and even just being there. Michael Penix Jr., even McCarthy, although I think he probably will end up going top 6 or so. Certainly Bo Nix from Oregon is somebody I think he would do a lot of homework on. It just, what contending team, maybe I'm missing something. What contending team right now has a quarterback that did not come via the draft? You look at Lamar and Burrow and Josh Allen and Mahomes and Hurts. All those guys, they draft them. And yeah, I know Pittsburgh is never going to draft top 3, and so you can't get that, Andrew Luck type of guy. But there's tons of examples of quarterbacks that were first rounders. I think you got to get a guy in the first round, but guys that weren't top 3 picks, Mahomes and Allen. Jackson went 32nd overall, and Baltimore traded up for him.
Houston's quarterback situation, they were in the playoffs. Cleveland, that was kind of.
That was it's a weird one. It's an exception, right, I guess, with Watson, but I mean, then Flacco took him and they played 5 quarterbacks. I mean, now Stroud was a top 2 pick, and so I know Pittsburgh won't be there. But point is, to what you're getting at is the teams that compete are the teams that draft and develop quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at Green Bay with what they've got going on. Mm-hmm. I know the Rams traded obviously for
that's one.
For one, Detroit traded for one.
Yeah, there are some, I guess, exceptions.
There are outliers, but those guys are usually former pedigree guys too,
Yeah, and Goff was drafted and took them to a Super Bowl, although it was kind of almost in spite rather than because of that. And also, I just think that rookies.
If there is an outlier, though, to kind of matching up with the Cleveland's, the Lions, the Buccaneers with Mayfield, the Rams. If there's a match to that potentially this offseason for Pittsburgh, that guy would likely be Russell Wilson, right?
But almost, I think, a worse version. And yeah, I mean, the Buccaneers, like, they're a playoff team, but are they a Super Bowl team? No. Even the Rams, are they a Super Bowl team right now? Not right now. I think they're a playoff team, and that's where Pittsburgh's at. Like the teams to go get the veteran type quarterbacks, I think, become competitive playoff teams. They don't usually turn into contenders. The contenders are the homegrown type of guys. And again, I think with rookie quarterbacks, these guys can play right away. We're not in the era where rookies have to sit and they got to take 3 years to figure it out. As you mentioned, CJ Stroud just had an amazing season for anyone, regardless of rookie status or not. So I think rookies can play right away if you find the right guy.
Boils back down to the Steelers got to get improved play at the quarterback position, period. Whatever that looks like, and we ought to have another quarterback in the room here, at least one within the next week. Will it be Russell Wilson? Who knows? But he's obviously headed to Pittsburgh to talk to them. So, I mean, we've kept dressing and undressing this thing several different ways already. And now it feels like we need the meme up there of the guy walking down the street holding Justin Fields' hands and then turn around and looking at Russell Wilson walk by now, right?
Right. What do you think happens? I think we'll get our answer pretty soon, within a week or so, on where Wilson signs. Again, I've been kind of all over the place with quarterback stuff, so take all this with a big old grain of salt. I think he comes to Pittsburgh. I think Mike Tomlin will sell him better than any coach will be able to sell him, even if Pittsburgh frames it as competition, which they will. I think Wilson will sit there internally and say, I can beat Kenny Pickett. I think you get Mike Tomlin in a room with somebody, he's going to convince you to sign.
We got some breaking news. The Steelers are releasing cornerback Patrick Peterson.
Oh, my goodness. That's late in the process.
Yep.
No, I mean, I thought he was going to stay. I thought he was going to stay with that roster bonus too, with the versatility and the experience. So why not just more news on top of it all right now? Man, I thought they would do that earlier, right? Instead of doing it kind of right before free agency, the way that they did it right by a core four and Trubisky and those guys found jobs. So that's a lot of snaps to replace. I get that his role and there was decline in play. He couldn't play outside cornerback anymore, but I thought there'd be enough versatility and experience that would make it worth him staying around for one more season.
Man, this damn thing just don't stop.
It really does not stop.
Turn the hose off, man. Patrick Peterson out the door here. Well, that forces us to shift in this show here. Now, let me give you some.
Yeah, this is literally us live here as this comes in. Right. I mean, Peterson's comments in recent weeks have been looking more pessimistic about his chances to stay. And I thought they would hold on to him for one more season.
Peterson obviously was due that $3 million roster bonus coming up, along with a $3.85 million salary. So they will save $6.85 million prior to roster displacement.
All right. So you got to go replace those snaps, the versatility. They had Cam Sutton 2 years ago. They had Peterson last year. You can do it. But, who's your slot corner right now? Peterson's gone. Sullivan's a free agent. I think they probably will re-sign him on the cheap on a 1-year deal, but he's a, early down kind of guy, not a third and long passing situation type of slot corner. You look at a potential slot options in free agency. I think there's Thomas from the Raiders, I want to say. Sanders still from Michigan from the draft is going to be an option, talked about a ton. So another hole to fill.
But there are some free agent, street free agent cornerbacks out there now as well too. So I would imagine that they're going to get maybe one or two of those here.
Yeah, we'll have to go through the name a bit more, but that is just more news on top of news. I thought they would do that earlier if they were going to cut him. I mean, why not cut the guy when you were cutting Mason Cole. I mean, you probably knew what was going to happen with him or not. Give him some time. You know, a veteran you want to treat with respect. I mean, there still is some time here, but he's getting released kind of on top of everybody else in the league getting released.
Maybe they looked at this as wanting the market to flood a little bit as at the cornerback position, to maybe to use that as some sort of leverage to get him to lower his price down, to use that at one last chance at talking about a contract adjustment before making a final decision on him, or at least wanting to see how the market flooded at a certain position.
Yeah, maybe they tried to do a pay cut route and he wouldn't take it, and they said we're not gonna play at your current price, and so we're gonna let you go. We'll see what on Allen Robinson. I assume something will be happening very soon on him. I imagine they're probably going to those last couple guys and Peterson and Robinson and trying to figure out contractually, can you do anything here? I mean, we'll see if Robinson ends up sticking around on a rework type of deal.
He's going to have to do something. He ain't staying at $10 million. We've said that all off season here. So, boy, what a morning here. All right. Anything left on Russell Wilson? We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out, right?
Yeah, we'll let it play out. Again, visited the Giants. Believe he's got probably some more meetings coming up with the Raiders and who knows who else. But yeah, that's we'll keep you posted. That's for sure.
All right. How shall we pivot now until the next news breaks?
Yeah. Speaking of releases, one other defensive back was released.
You think people like listen to this kind of stuff live like this? It's real. It's live. All right. Carry us on.
We'll do it live. Keanu Neal, defensive back, released on.
I got that. That. Who was that?
Bill O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly. Yeah. We'll do it live.
Yeah. I'll censor myself from all the cursing in that clip. Anyway, speaking of defensive backs released, Keanu Neal, safety, released on Thursday with a failed physical. He had suffered a rib injury in that Week 10 win over Green Bay off that interception that was tipped. How about that? It was tipped by Patrick Peterson, picked off by Keanu Neal, and both are now out the door. And so Neal did not return. Well, curious situation because it felt like he was going to be okay. They went to IR and really never heard from him again. Box safety, declining play. Wasn't too surprised by that. It's a really strong safety free agent class. It's been flooded by a million names that have been out there and released by teams over the last couple of days. So I think safety will be something they certainly attack, and even more so now that Peterson is out the door. But that is the news on Keanu Neal, one and done in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Neal was set to earn $2.25 million in 2024, so the Steelers will save that salary cap space minus the top 51 roster displacement, which for him, that would be Corey Trice Jr. hopping up into the rule of 51 at a $795,000 base salary there. So your displacement would be the $2.25 million minus the $795,000 would be the actual true recognized salary cap space. Not a ton, but look, Keanu Neal, once again, no sense paying him that money, especially with the safety market flooding the way it is. You got a $460,000 dead money charge with Keanu Neal there. So once again, designation was a failed physical with him, and with one safety out the door and with one veteran cornerback out the door and the market flooding the way it is, there's going to be some action for the Steelers at those two positions, I think, in free agency.
Yeah, a ton of it for sure. I've gone through some names in my wish list. Mike Edwards, Julian Blackman, Cameron Curl will cost a lot of money. Slot corner, I posted on Twitter just a couple minutes ago, and on my list was Kenny Moore. I think Kenny Moore would be fantastic in Pittsburgh. Will cost something, will not be cheap, I don't think, but that is, again, a top slot corner that can play the run, I think be a 3-down kind of guy. Pittsburgh has gone through this sort of rotation post-Hilton. We have a rundown guy and then a pass-down guy. It kind of made things a little bit more messy and complicated. And I think ideally you try to find that one guy that can do it all. I think Kenny Moore can be that guy.
You got Avonte Maddox out the door in Philadelphia now, who's battled some injury that should be cheap that's plausible. And that actually ended up becoming official yesterday on the transaction sheet. There was some speculation that might be a post June 1st hit release, meaning that he would have to be released after the start of the new league year. But I think I saw him on the transaction sheet yesterday. Travarius White from Buffalo out the door. And so it'll be interesting to see if they have any interest there. Another guy that's been banged up, over the last couple seasons, but should come pretty cheap because of the market and injury history there. So look, and Levi Wallace was on Good Morning Football this morning. It doesn't sound like I know people aren't going to lose sleep over it, but it doesn't sound like he's going to return to Pittsburgh, or at least at any. If he does, it would be a veteran benefit contract. One would think when it comes to him. That cornerback room's gotten mighty thin right now. So you just can't count on filling it via the draft. So they're going to have to go out and sign somebody in free agency here, one or two, maybe a nickel and an outside guy.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a very active free agency in terms of the secondary. Strong safety, slot corner, and outside corner are all, I think, big needs right now, and there are going to be some options. So I think you're going to see, Pittsburgh certainly needs to get younger and faster defensively. I think it's a big problem for them. They've gotten old, they've gotten pretty slow, and those aren't the say all end all, but they're important kind of components of your team. And I expect them to do that, but through both the draft and free agency, but obviously starting with free agency.
All right, what else do we got to talk about here?
The players they had released earlier in the offseason, two of them have found homes in Mitch Trubisky, who's going back to Buffalo on a 2-year deal, and Chukwuma Okorafor going to New England on a 2-year contract, I believe, as well. So both guys going to the AFC East. Kudos to both guys, and good on Pittsburgh for releasing them and allowing those guys to find homes before this kind of wave of free agency kicks off.
The Chukwuma Okorafor deal is actually 1 year, $4 million with a $2 million signing bonus. His base salary will be $1.125 million, fully guaranteed. $40K roster bonus up to $680K. He's got $195K workout bonus and up to $4.25 million in playtime incentives. So really a prove it kind of deal for Chukwuma Okorafor. Can make quite a bit of money if he stays. If it seems like if he stays healthy and plays well.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully it works out. Didn't work out in Pittsburgh. No surprise he was released. And Trubisky going back to Buffalo to be the backup where he was for the 2021 season behind Josh Allen. It's a good fit overall. It sounds like for him. It sounds like he's happy to be back in Buffalo. He thanked Pittsburgh for releasing him early. Said it was a good mutual breakup. So hopefully he's able to do well up there.
All right. Which way now? Whew.
Yeah. Trying to catch your breath.
I'm going to need a shower.
Need a timeout, need a TV timeout here, I think, for us to catch our breath. I think at this point, I should mention as well, Kevin Dotson, he has cashed in and he's re-upping with the Rams on a deal worth $16 million per year. I don't have the full contract specifics in front of me, but I think maybe you can pull them up, Dave, or I can pull up the article on what the initial numbers were for Kevin Dotson.
It was something like $32 million or something like that in guaranteed. We don't know if it's full guaranteed, but at least the initial report makes it looks like it's a $16 million APY for him. We'll have to see how the exact language works out as far as the guarantees go. But look, fantastic season for him with the Rams at right guard. That was the guy that you hoped that he would be in Pittsburgh, and on the right side at that. Worked out extremely well for him with the Rams. You knew he was going to get paid this offseason, and he did get paid by the team that traded for him. So good for Kevin Dotson, and it's a tale of, you kind of wonder, had they left him at right guard with the Steelers, how all that would have played out. But that milk has been spilled and cleaned up already.
3 years, 48 million is the initial top line number. And again, some of these numbers can be a little inflated initially, but regardless, big money for Dots. And as you said, well deserved, happy for him. Glad he turned things around, and really the Rams just used him smarter than Pittsburgh did. If there's any consolation for Pittsburgh, they have a good pair of guards in Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels. So it's not like they're really struggling and needing guard help, but obviously they did not handle Dotson well, and that's been proven by his success with the Rams.
Yep, agreed.
All right, we can throw it here to our combine discussion. Again, feels like more than an eternity ago based on the news of the day here, but some great information, insight, and the draft will become very important for Pittsburgh to fill all these holes, including potentially one even greater one at cornerback now that Patrick Peterson has been released. So let's take a pause here, come back with Jonathan Heitrader, Joe Clark, and Ross McCorkle. And welcome back to the podcast. And as Dave and I mentioned on the previous show, I have a combine roundtable as our crew from Steelers Depot back home from Indianapolis this past week. Had 3 guys go to Indy. Fantastic job by Jonathan Heitrader, Joe Clark, and Ross McCorkle providing interviews and insight analysis from both Omar Khan and his interviews with the media, and also, of course, the prospects that were there in Indianapolis. So great job all around. It's really, really beneficial for us to find out about interviews and, of course, learn more about these players and a little bit of their backstory and history. So, Ross, I believe your first time out at Indy. How was that experience?
Oh man, it was everything I expected and more. Definitely nice to have Jonathan and Joe down there as well, being the veterans that they are, being able to lean on them in that way. But yeah, it was great. Just the access you get to the players. It's much more structured than say the Senior Bowl, where you kind of have to pull those players on the side of the field and you only have 10 minutes. So everything was great.
Joe, what are your thoughts down there at Indianapolis?
Yeah, no, it's a good time. It's definitely, you show up, you get there early, you got to get your spot because it's gonna fill up pretty quick. Just the amount of people that are there, when the interviews started at 8, 9 a.m. versus the people at 12, it was double. So it's definitely a busy place. Definitely a lot of fun though. Like Ross said, good access. It's well organized. It's always that by 2 years I've been there, both been a great time.
And Jonathan, that was your third time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was my third time for Steelers Depot. I actually went back in 2020 for a conference, so technically 4th time in Indy. But it's kind of like when you go so many times, like Alex probably understands with the Senior Bowl, where you just kind of like understand the flow of everything and how everything works. It's nice when you kind of go there, you kind of know exactly how like the interviews process is going to go. You know how like the scrums are going to act. So you know how to fit your questions in, being able to meet up with people that are in the space after a year. So it's definitely a great feeling to just kind of feel like you know it like the back of your hand.
Jonathan, let me stay with you and let me ask a pretty broad question, but I know you're equipped to answer it. What would you say is the strongest position group of this draft, and how did that group represent itself at this year's combine?
Yeah, I would probably say that the strongest overall position group was the wide receiver group. I mean, that class is just loaded with talent. Like you have that legitimately 10 to 12 guys that, could easily go within the top 50, 60 picks. I mean, you have guys that could easily like 5 to 8 guys that could probably be first round picks that are going to be in this class. It has all the flavors that you want. If you're looking for precise nuance route runners, if you're looking for size, if you're looking for speed, if you're looking for great slot options, like it's just absolutely stacked from top to bottom. I mean, you're going to see, and that's the thing though too with that could possibly benefit the Steelers, is that because it's so stacked that there's going to be receivers that are going to get pushed down in this draft, where you're going to see a guy in the 2nd round and the 3rd round, and maybe with one of their 2 4th round picks, where he probably would be considered a lot higher of a prospect and should go a lot higher, but because of the overall demand of the position, as well as other positions coming off the board, I think that there's going to be a receiver in day 2 or day 3 that Pittsburgh could possibly capitalize on great value if they choose to go that way.
Who'd you come away with, Jonathan, at the wide receiver position that you really feel that in talking to them and seeing their on-field performance at the combine, going through the drills or whatnot, and also from what you previously knew heading into the combine, who are some of the wide receivers that you could visualize the Steelers, 3 or 4 or 5 of them that you could see being Steelers?
Yeah, so I'll break that question up into two different positions. Like you have more your slot based options, and then you have your more prototypical outside wide receivers. So with the slots, the two guys that kind of stick out to mind the most are um, Roman Wilson from Michigan, as well as Lad McConkey from Georgia. And you could probably throw Jalen McMillan in that group because he also had a formal with the Steelers at the combine. Just guys that are prototypical slot receivers, with Roman and McConkey kind of being that undersized receiver, but both of them dominated at the Senior Bowl. They had been in contact with, the Steelers down there at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, we didn't hear too much about them talking to the Steelers here at the combine. We can get more into that later, but just those nuanced runners that can win against coverage and can also play inside, outside. They're very versatile. And then for the outside receivers, it was kind of surprising to see how interested that they kind of came away with, at least from the formal meeting perspective, with some of the top guys. And some of the guys that kind of stuck out to me were Adonai Mitchell from Texas, Brian Thomas from LSU, and then probably Troy Franklin from Oregon. Those guys all stand 6'3", 6'4". They all run in the 4.4s. I mean, Brian Thomas ran a 4.34 nearly at 220, and Adonai Mitchell also ran in the 4.3s as well too, with great size. So again, height, weight, speed specimens that can win inside, outside. They move to the slot. They can win against press coverage on the outside. And yeah, we don't know what's going to be the state with Deontay Johnson entering the last year of his contract. We know that Arthur Smith tends to go with more two wide receiver sets and not necessarily with the slot receiver. So if they're looking for a potential like playmaker on the outside that can, filter in a little bit in the slot, those guys would be great picks, especially since because of the draft class strength. If some of those guys get pushed in the second round, if you get to land like a Brian Thomas or an Adonai Mitchell or Troy Franklin in the second round, you're doing well for yourself.
Ross, talking about the offensive line, I know for Pittsburgh it's such a priority. Center, offensive tackle, looks like really strong classes of both those positions in the draft. What were your impressions on both groups?
Yeah, so the offensive line, I mean, that was kind of where my head was at when you asked the deepest position group. Receivers certainly up there as well, but offensive line, I mean, there's if you need a tackle, you can get a first round talent tackle in the second round and maybe even the top of the third round, to be honest, because there's just so many guys there. It was interesting, especially with some of the center prospects in particular. Like this is kind of a sidebar to the question, but they didn't have a formal meeting with some of the top centers that we expected, including Jackson Powers Johnson. We kind of came to the conclusion throughout the week that the Steelers were kind of opting to not meet with some of these guys that they may have gotten exposure to at the Senior Bowl. I know from talking to Jonathan and Joe from last year, that wasn't necessarily the case. So I don't know if that's a strategy change or if there's something more to glean from that, but it was interesting to see them not talk to some of these names that we thought were kind of slam dunk. Oh yeah, they're definitely going to meet with them. But yeah, I mean, really all across the line, there's some of these guys that are extremely position, versatile. There's Graham Barton. He ended up measuring, I think, a little bit longer than some expected. And so, maybe he is a tackle where a lot of people were assuming he was a center. He obviously didn't participate at the Senior Bowl. I think he had an injury towards the end of the season that kept him out. But yeah, he's kind of a guy that many were linking to the Steelers at center, and it kind of looks like, honestly, he might end up going at tackle. But he said he can play pretty much anywhere along the line there. So trying to think of some other impressive names. I think Tanner Bortolini, this is a guy that we looked at the Senior Bowl. He had some extremely impressive workout numbers there. I know you don't want to read too much into just the raw athleticism, but it is certainly interesting to see that with a guy of his size. Who are some other names?
Obviously
sorry.
Mims, right?
Yeah, Marius Mims. Yeah, I mean the picture that was circulating on Twitter of him standing next to some of the reporters, it's just like, I mean, he's an absolute freak of nature. Patrick Paul's another guy. I mean, he's interesting. I spoke to him at the Senior Bowl as well. He has kind of he plays left tackle, but he has a martial arts background. He's more comfortable at left tackle, but I think, that martial arts background, he might be a little more comfortable switching up his hands than, say, someone that doesn't do martial arts. So he's kind of an interesting, I think he's 6'0", 7'4", 331. He's got 36 and a quarter inch arms. I mean, he's somebody that was intriguing to me at the Senior Bowl and definitely backed that up at the Combine as well. Another guy that was somewhat interesting, he's maybe a little light in the pants, Roger Rosengarten, Washington there. He has the connection to Mark Bruner, who's obviously a former Steeler. He played at the University of Washington back when he was in college, and Roger spoke highly of his connection to Bruner, saying that I think he even went over to his house for Christmas or some of the holidays and stuff like that. He's very athletic. I know the Steelers are trying to move into a more outside zone kind of scheme. So, Roger may be a little undersized, but he does have that athleticism, and he was pretty impressive at the Senior Bowl as well. So
when you, I wanted to get the thoughts of the three of you on, let's see, who was it? The undersized, the one that they're debating on whether or not he's going to play guard or tackle. Who is that?
Troy Fautanu.
Yeah, Fautanu out of Washington, 6'3", 6'8", 317 pounds, but has relatively long arms at 34 and a half. What's kind of the takeaway? Because that, when you look at tackles over historically that have gone in the first round, true tackles, it's hard to find any that have the height under 6'4". But just looking at how he moved, he did nothing wrong at the Combine from what I could tell. But is the sits with the three of you, or is there any of you that would disagree that this guy might not last at tackle, or is he definitely does he definitely deserve a shot at least at tackle?
I think with I actually did his draft profile there, and so I watched a little bit of his tape. I came away wondering about his arm length. He definitely proved, that's not a concern. I mean, he kind of makes up for what he doesn't have in height at 6'0". What did he come in at?
6'03" and 3/4.
Yeah, so a little short, but he had those long arms, which kind of makes up for it. He has the ability. I think the major concern to me was the length. It didn't look like he used his length all that well on the tape. There was some times where guys were getting into his chest with the long arm and just kind of walking him right on back to the quarterback. But certainly the change of direction, the athleticism, all that stuff is there. He's good in space. He can block up screens and kind of move out there. So I think he deserves a shot at tackle, but he's kind of more or less, he has longer arms than Skoronski last year, but I think he kind of falls in that bucket of what is a team going to do with him. Jonathan
or Joe on him?
I'm kind of with Ross that he deserves, a bit of a shot. I don't know how well he's really going to do, just because you look at those shorter tackles that go, and none of them really amount to much of anything, and a lot of them usually wind up kicking back inside. And I think the team that drafts him, obviously if Pittsburgh drafts him, they don't have a clear need at tackle, they give him a shot at guard, but I don't really see that happening. I think a team that drafts him would be an offensive line needy team that will be okay moving him inside if they have to, and I think it would probably behoove them to start him at guard, just because like Ross said, you watch the tape and there's a lot of times the arms just he doesn't use them the way he should, and so it's definitely a concern. And it's just, when you look at the history of shorter tackles, sometimes the data is there that not a lot of them really work out, especially when you take them early. So going with a guard, or using him as a guard, I think is probably his best long-term path.
And
or Ross, yeah, go ahead. Go, Ross.
I think I even had him at the top of this, early in the second round. It seems like, it's kind of hard when you're looking around and everybody seems super high on him, top 15, top 20 kind of guy. Most of that was just to do with, is he able to play tackle? Because if he's not, and he's a guard, that obviously it's a little less of a premium position. Probably you could see him slide towards the end of the first round there.
And he was mostly a left tackle too, wasn't he, at Washington?
Yeah, and Roger was over on the right side.
All right, Jonathan, any thoughts on Troy out of Washington before we move on?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of him during the season before we got kind of to the pre-draft process, and just kind of the things that Ross hit on is just like his athleticism, his play strength, his ability to play out in space, his ability to kind of cover and be able to make pass protection, being able to cover the arc just with his movement, it really does stick out like in that way. Obviously, the height is not what you want overall, but you also have seen shorter tackles like, David Bakhtiari is known as like a shorter tackle, right about 6'4" even. And, he has the arm length and he has the athleticism where that hasn't really hindered him in the past. Obviously, you have like a couple eighths of an inch difference between him and Fontenot. And obviously, you can have it where if, Fontenot works with his hand placement, being able to keep guys and do better combative hands, make sure that guys don't get on his chest and continue to work that over time. Like, I think that he could be very solid at tackle. It's kind of like the thought process of like, Zach Martin or some of these other guys that were good tackles in college, but could they be phenomenal guards in the NFL? And that's the question you have to ask yourself with Troy Fontenot is like, okay, could he be a good tackle in the NFL with his athleticism, with his arm length, with his tools that he has? Yeah, he could probably be a good tackle. But if you kick him inside a guard, what is his upside there? So that's the question that you kind of have to ask yourself as an NFL team. For the Steelers' perspective, just knowing the need at tackle probably would be viewed as a tackle, at least try him at tackle. If that all fails, kick him into guard, but the guards are kind of set at this moment in time. So I would say draft him as a tackle, try him there, and allow him to compete and see if this like height is a real issue going forward.
Joe, of the non kind of perceived first round tackles, who are some of the favorites we should be definitely linking to the Steelers that are potential right tackles or have the experience at right tackles? That would be, once again, it's all a guessing game, but from where you sit right now, that wouldn't be first round prospects necessarily.
Yeah, the name I keep coming back to is Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. He's got experience on the right side. The team had a formal meeting with him at the combine, and he came in. He's got the pedigree. He was a high recruit. He was a freshman starter, which doesn't really happen all that often at Notre Dame. Even played pretty well there, and he's a guy that I think could probably go third, maybe fall to the fourth, depending on if some of the top tackles fall early. I know we've talked to Garrett Greenfield a couple of times. He's a later round option, but he's another name that he's played on the right side before at South Dakota State. He did play the left recently, but he's also played full seasons on the right. So given that he has that experience as a maybe more of a project, I know he tested his testing numbers earlier, but the one name I think is kind of the top, middle round past that first wave of prospects that I think Steelers fans should be focusing on is definitely Fisher.
Let's talk about West Virginia center Zach Frazier. I've been talking about him a lot. Reportedly, a pre-draft visit with Pittsburgh. Now he's going to be a local visit, so it doesn't count against the 30 allotted. But still, a name that's been discussed and connected to Pittsburgh a million times, and probably a million more before late April. Big question, I think, with Frazier for the combine, and one of its two purposes is the medical component. Broke his leg late in the season. He did not test and run the 40 in vertical, but he was on the field in drills. He spoke about his medical situation as well. So I'm not sure who talked to him the most, but give us an update on what Frazier had to say about how teams are feeling about him medically.
I can go on this one with Frazier. We were kind of all there just because he was held up in medical. So we were kind of all there because he was like the last interview that we had of the combine. But with him, it kind of sounded like in regard to his medical that he started to like work out and started to take care of like, the training process. It was good to go see him like be able to be on the field for drills. In terms of the actual testing, I don't know. He wasn't very much committal on whether or not he'd compete at his pro day. For the most part, it was just being able to go through the medicals and being able to interview with teams. But he said that he should be a full go when it comes to rookie mini camp, OTAs, and things of that nature. So with the medical issue, I think that he should be all good to go, especially once the draft rolls around. But again, you kind of have to weigh that with some of the other center prospects like Graham Barton, like Jackson Powers Johnson, like Cedric Van Granger, like with those guys being able to be healthy and being able to take part in the drills and take part in the testing. Whereas with him, you just kind of have to base it off of tape, which ultimately is what matters the most, but it's still something that teams are going to want to like know about.
Sure. Any other questions, Dave, O-line related? Anything else you wanted to follow up on?
No, I think, is there, I'm just trying to scroll through. I think someone that keeps coming up in my look here is, where is it here? No, I think, no, I had it on top of my head, but I don't have any. No, Patrick Paul. What's the word on Patrick Paul out of Houston?
Yeah, he was the guy I was speaking about a little earlier about his martial arts background.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, so I mean, they do an air raid offense over there, so it's a little different schematically, and I don't know how much experience he has with kind of a traditional NFL offense, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, he said he's definitely views himself as a left tackle. He said he'd be able to pick up on right tackle, and like I said, with the martial arts background, he probably has a little easier time with the hand stuff than most. But Jonathan, did you do his report?
Yeah, I did his report. I gave him an early second round grade. I found him as a guy just because of again, with like wide receiver, the tackles, there's a lot of really good quality tackles at the top. So that's just going to push guys down the board. So I think that if Pittsburgh doesn't take an offensive tackle in the first round, I think, either early to mid second round is going to be where Paul kind of lands. Like you said, his size is incredible, but he moves extremely well for that size. I remember being at the Senior Bowl with you, Ross, and we were seeing Patrick Paul leading up the way on like a toss sweep or something like that. And it's like, that's a big man moving. So I like the athletic measurables are there. The size is there. So, and he's also one of the most battle tested left tackles currently in this draft class, having played a lot. He's one of PFF's best graded pass protectors in this class. And again, it's like the arm length and the use of independent hands that you see on tape really sticks out with him. He's also just a phenomenal interview. He's a very smart, very cerebral person. He went for like political science. He said his goal after football is to become the president of Nigeria, just because that's where he and his family are from. So if Pittsburgh is not able to land a tackle, say they go like center or corner or a different position in the first round, he's definitely a guy that you should be highlighting in the second.
I'm sorry, I had my name screwed up there. Frank Crum was the guy I was looking for more info on. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he play some left tackle last year at Wyoming after previously spending most of his time at right tackle? What's kind of the takeaway on Frank Crum, real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I saw he ran the combine. He ran the combine with 4.94. So he's definitely got that athleticism there. Yeah, I think he's a 4-year starter. He probably, again, kind of like in the Greenfield realm, he's kind of probably a later guy. He has the ability to play either side, so again, could be an option later. Just the athletic profile, just everything that he has it's intriguing, but he's just kind of not all that polished right now. So that's kind of one of the issues when you look at it, is that just doesn't have the polish to kind of be an immediate impact guy. So you'd probably have to sit for a year or two and then come and fill in.
Okay.
I don't know that any of us actually spoke to him in specific.
Actually, his parents stayed at our hotel, so I kind of got to talk to him because he actually sat down with his parents in the lobby while I was chilling with them. So I didn't really put two and two together, but just guy dressed up in that. So it was just shared a very brief conversation, but overall a really nice guy.
And he was a right tackle until 2023. Then he kicked over to the left side. So there is that left and right tackle versatility. Let's go to the other side of the trenches, the defensive line for Pittsburgh. Still, I think, a need with an aging starting group and duo of Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi. I became a little more optimistic seeing these guys weigh in and test and move, that there might be some options there for Pittsburgh. Mason Smith from LSU. I think Chris Jenkins from Michigan. Chris Jenkins Jr., I should say, from Michigan, is a really interesting guy. Ross, I'll start with you. What are your impressions of this D-line group?
Yeah, I was surprised. I spoke to Mason Smith and there was no formal meeting there. I was a little surprised given the lack of kind of people in the class that have the ideal kind of measurables that the Steelers look for. I think Chris Jenkins, like you were just mentioning, was somebody who stuck out to me. He was extremely charismatic, just really good interview. He has obviously a father that was very successful in the NFL, an uncle that had a decent NFL career. And so I think he checked most of the boxes. There was one box he didn't check. I think that may have been
the height.
Yeah. So, but he does have fairly decent length to make up for it. Another guy that I actually just wrote up an interview on was Eric Watts out of UConn. He's an interesting late round guy to me. And one of the things that stuck out was he was a Senior Bowl guy, so they would have had access to him. And it wasn't a formal meeting at the combine, but they did have some informal stuff, which, a lot of the Senior Bowl guys didn't even say they had informal stuff. So I thought that was interesting. But he's an absolute athletic freak. I think I just posted in the Discord not that long ago his relative athletic score or whatever. I think he was 9th out of 1,400 defensive ends since 1983 or whenever he started tracking it. So he's got pretty much everything you'd want. He's a little bit light. I think he's like 274 pounds right now. So he'd need to add, 15, 16 pounds to get kind of in that ideal range. But I talked to him. He said he's, right now he feels like he's at his ideal weight for some teams. Some teams want him to add weight. He said he's would have no problem kind of adding that weight. And he's played a lot of 5-tech there at UConn, but he said in some situations they'd kick him inside to 3. He's not super comfortable there, he admitted, but he seems like at the very least with that athletic profile and kind of one of the very few people in this class that fit the most of the ideal kind of measurements for the Steelers. I think he's a very interesting name to me in the late round. I think another guy, and I'll let Jonathan kind of expand on this because it's kind of been his guy, but Rook, I'm probably going to butcher this last name, or Hororo.
Bless you.
Yeah, from Clemson. He's in terms of the top couple rounds, he's one of the guys who does actually fit, I think, everything that the Steelers look for. So I'll let Jonathan take it away there.
Yeah, I was pulling it up once we started talking defensive line because I knew it was a name that we're going to talk about. But I want to jump on his profile pretty quickly because I wanted to do him before because he was supposed to go to the Senior Bowl, didn't show up to the Senior Bowl. I was kind of bummed out and kind of talked to Ross about that. But when he was at the Combine, he was a guy that I wanted to prioritize just because he had that size before he actually measured in. About being listed at Clemson like 6'4", 290. He came in with right around that size, the arm length, basically everything that you're looking for with the Steelers defensive lineman that they like to have. And then he tested extremely well. His interview was really good. Again, another guy from Nigeria. He was very charismatic. He only started playing football at age 17. He was more of a basketball guy before that. So you look at his tape, he's a pretty strong run defender overall. He's able to take on blocks, stack and shed, being able to get into gaps and being able to fight against interior guys. He's played all the way from the nose out to the outside as a 5 to 7 tech. So he's played up and down the line of scrimmage. He needs to work a little bit more with his hand usage as a pass rusher, as he tends to win more with effort rushes. But you see those flashes with his hand usage on tape, kind of similar like Keanu Benton, completely different body type. But yeah, again, Keanu like flashed a little bit, but often would win with power. Whereas like Onorahono is kind of the same way, where you see those flashes of that hand usage, being able to string moves together, but oftentimes you just see him trying to knock a guy back with a bull rush. So again, with that and just consistency in finishing plays are a couple things that stuck out in his tape. I gave him an early 3rd round grade, but again, with his size, the measurables, the testing, and the fact that his best football is probably be ahead of him just because he's only been playing football for a few years compared to most prospects, I definitely could see him being a huge target at 51 overall.
Joe, what about buddy Gabe Hall out of Baylor?
Yeah, I mean, he was a standout of the Senior Bowl. We've talked about his measurables. He's got, everything the Steelers like. I didn't get a chance to talk to him at the Combine. I was talking to, I think that was the session. I was talking to Jordan Jefferson, Fabian Lovett, but I think I love the guy as a mid-round prospect. As like Ross said, there's so few guys that fit everything the Steelers look for in this draft class, and he has them. By all accounts, he was a great interview. He was a great guy. I forget which one of Jonathan or Ross talked to him, but yeah, I mean, I think that he'd be a great fit. He looks, again, if you watch his tape, there's definitely some stuff that he has to improve on. He's not as polished as he should or as he could be, and that's why he's going to be available, in the 3rd or the 4th round. But he could definitely be a bargain. Get him in with Carl Dunbar in that defensive line room and see if they can make something happen with him.
Jonathan or Ross on Hall?
Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to I was the one that did the interview with Hall, and just because we didn't get a whole lot of him at the Senior Bowl, so he's definitely one I wanted to prioritize coming here. He measured in at 6'5", 6" and 294 pounds. ran really well at that size with like the 34 and 3/8 inch arms with an 84-inch wingspan. So definitely meets it. Alex nailed it on his report, though, that he doesn't play with great leverage. He's often standing up. He often gets walked back because he doesn't play with great leverage. And oftentimes, like, you see those flashes again with him as a pass rusher, but he just isn't very consistent with it. So he needs to improve in that sense. But he talked extensively with Carl Dunbar. He said in his informal interviews that Carl Dunbar was one of his favorite interviews, saying that he was cool as heck, quoting him, and also saying that he likes to make use with his bull rush and his long arm and being able to do a push-pull with his counter with his pass rush move. So another guy that, again, his main issues are playing with leverage just because he's a bigger, taller guy, as well as being able to be more consistent of defeating blocks with his hand usage. But again, like if you look at with like Chris Jenkins and Orohono being more of that like day two kind of pick, if you don't get a defensive lineman on day two, Gabe Hall is kind of a guy where his measurables could push him into the second day, but given his tape and given like his needs in terms of improving, I think he's more of like that guy that you would target with one of your fourth round picks.
Joe, let me just go back to you. You mentioned him briefly, Fabian Lovett, not a high priority, and he's more interior guy, nose tackle, plugger, not going to offer a ton as a pass rusher. But Pittsburgh may need a backup nose tackle with Montravius Adams set to become a free agent. What did you learn from Lovett in that interview that he did with reporters?
Yeah, Lovett was one of the favorite guys that I talked to. He talked a lot about, how important it was coming back for this year and how upset he was, obviously that FSU got left out of the playoff and for all they worked for as a team. But he also especially talked about his son. When his son was born, he kind of had some respiratory issues, and Lovett talked about how he plays every day for him, and that's something that really inspires him when he's on the field. And he just kind of talked about the brotherhood that he had with, some of his FSU teammates, like, Braden Fisk. Obviously, he was a guy that set the combat on fire with how he ran last week, but just kind of like the bond that they all had. And I mean, I think he would be a great addition to a locker room. On tape, his pass rush, he doesn't really have a ton of pass rush juice. He really just kind of relies on the long arm because he has very, very long arms. But it doesn't. I think he only has 6.5 sacks in his college career, not a huge number. So that's definitely something that he's got to work on if he gets to the league. But he did not meet with the Steelers at all, but he did have a formal with Denver, an informal with a few other teams. But maybe he's a guy that the Steelers will bring in for one of their visits. But as of right now, the team didn't have any meeting with him at the combine. But definitely a guy I really enjoyed talking with.
Let's move on to pretty decent cornerback class here. Got some inside, got some outside guys. Terry and Arnold out of Alabama seem to be as advertised. Boy, I mean, go down the list here. Is Cam Hart screaming? There's two of them that I think scream Steelers specifically when it comes to this group at the combine. One I think is Cam Hart out of Notre Dame, and the second is a Michigan man, Mike Sanderstill, who I think Jonathan, didn't you do homework on him? I mean, going back into last season. So I'll start with you, Jonathan, to maybe talk a little bit about Mike and tell us what you know about Cam Hart as well too.
Yeah, so it was nice because I had some inside information with my my cousin being like the head athletic trainer at Michigan. So he said that when I texted him before the interviews with the defensive back, he said Mike Sanderstill is like the greatest like underrated / unknown player that he's seen there in the last 24 years. Just this guy that came in as a wide receiver, converted to defensive back, and was as much of a leader on the field as he was off the field. He's this guy that is very well spoken. He does a little bit with like social media and like production himself. His interview was great. And he's just that Mike Hilton clone when you pop in the tape. Like, as we knew, Mike Hilton wasn't like the best overall coverage player like when he started out like coming into Pittsburgh, but he was a very good blitzer. He was very good in run support. Obviously made plays in the passing game, and now he's transitioned and continued to make plays and grow into more of a player now in Cincinnati. But it was fun to be able to talk to Mike and just be like, do you model your game after? And the very first name he brought up was Mike Hilton, and actually said that he reached out to him in DM just to be able to kind of take pieces away from his game because he recognizes that they have the very same body type, very same athleticism. Sanderstill is a little bit better of an overall athlete than Hilton was coming out. So again, if you're looking for a guy that plays the slot and looking for that thing that Pittsburgh's missed in the slot since Hilton left, Sanders still is kind of like the perfect glove fit for that position.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of teams that view him as a good fit as well too. So probably have to burn a second or a third on him for sure, right?
I would say with the depth of this class and just like he's not the best overall like man coverage player. Like there's points and times where he does freeze when receivers give him a nice head fake or a jazz step at the top of the route. His battle with Jalen McMillan was awesome. I interviewed him as well too. He said the toughest player he faced all year was Mike, and Mike was talking about his battle with Jalen McMillan too. So going back and watching that tape for both the guys was fun. But I think with his coverage, as well as just like his overall size not being exactly where you want it to be, he can play on the outside, but he's more probably just going to be relegated to the slot. He's probably going to start getting considered in that like third round range at like probably in the 70s to 80s. So if the Steelers want him, they probably have to burn that 84th overall pick on him.
Who did the most work on Cam Hart, and is he an avatar?
I spoke to Cam. He was very impressive in the interview. I mean, he was a team captain. He spoke. I mean, he's very well spoken. I think he ran 4.5, which was kind of impressive for his overall size there. I didn't do his draft profile, but just watching him at the Senior Bowl, he was very impressive there. I mean, he's able to come down and be physical. He was pretty patient and wasn't biting on a lot of kind of double moves and stuff like that. He was sticky to the receivers. So he overall is definitely high up on my personal kind of big board there. Just being kind of the avatar kind of body size that he has, 6'0", he's got 33-inch arms. Just given what Con and Weidl did in that first draft with Trice and Porter, he kind of fits right in with that. And then I think the team captain and just some of the kind of how mature he is, and he seems to be a great locker room fit just from the brief conversation I had with them. I think he's definitely on their radar.
Let's see. RAS came in at 9.82, even though he ran a 4.5 40 there. So pretty athletic guy, at least for his size. You would have probably, I would imagine he's going to probably try to run that 40 again at his pro day. Wouldn't you imagine?
Yeah, and it looks like his first attempt there was almost 4.6, 4.59 there. So he went back and did a second attempt. So yeah, I could see him improving on that, especially given the rest of his athletic profile. What did he jump well? Is that what it was that got him so high up there?
39.5 and 10.10 on the broad. So he certainly didn't help him hurt himself there. And then the 20-yard shuttle, 4.24 and a 3-cone. Not outstanding on the 3-cone, but not bad, 7.112. Joe, who else screamed Steelers at the cornerback at the combine?
One guy that I banged the table for is Tyree Jackson out of Oregon. The Steelers did a lot of work with him at the Senior Bowl. He said that Mike Tomlin has a dog mentality and he likes attitude. And the thing I really like about him too is that he was at Alabama before he was at Oregon. Didn't play a ton of corner at Alabama, but he was a key special teamer for Alabama. So even with the Steelers, he can kind of help in that special teams aspect. I think he was 6'0", so almost 6'4". He had the third longest broad jump at 11 foot 1 inches. His vertical wasn't great, 36.5, but he's 6'4". He's another, he's probably in the same range as Cam Hart. He was a guy that I talked to a little bit. Before the draft, I kind of pegged him as, one of those longer, again, avatar corners. But definitely a lot of swagger on the field, the type of guy that could definitely be a nice long-term pairing next to Joey Porter Jr.
Jonathan, give me something on the safety group. If I had to guess, Pittsburgh will, make a move in for agency, given how many players have been added there. But still, there could be a possibility of this draft class. Not a strong group overall. Kinchins from Miami seemed a bit disappointing with his workout. Any hidden gems, diamonds in the rough here?
Yeah, I mean, with the top of the class, like they had formals with both Tyler Newman from Minnesota as well as Kalen Bullock from USC, and both those guys' tape is fun to watch overall. I would say, like with Newman, like he's kind of more of that guy that he played more free safety in Minnesota, but he said to me personally, like, he's played in the slot, he's played strong safety, he's played in the box. So he said whatever he could do to best complement Minkah Fitzpatrick, he definitely do. And Kalen is more of that pure free center field safety, but he also is a guy that can come in, play in the slot, play in the box as well too. So like, if those are options that Pittsburgh wants to look at, they definitely can. If you're looking down the list, though, I know Ross is a big fan of Vaki, who's kind of a specialist that can kind of go and play all over the place. You just kind of put him out there and he gets it done. Tyke Smith from Georgia is another player that just kind of is probably a day 3 guy that could, draw some eyes as a guy that, made a lot of plays for the Bulldogs here this past year, just kind of developed over his time. And a couple guys near the end of the draft that kind of stick out is Josh Proctor from Ohio State. He's more of that pure strong safety / special teamer, having that size to kind of play in the box as that nickel / dimebacker, as well as play in the slot a little bit. So those guys kind of stick out as like names like later on in the draft. But yeah, you could also look at a guy like James Williams, who we've had in a couple mock drafts. He was a safety at Miami. He's kind of played in the box as well too, just because he stands nearly 6'5", 220 some pounds. So his coverage isn't always the best, but he's definitely the best in that role, like where he plays closer to the line of scrimmage, having that similar Jaron Kearse size and body type. So those are a couple names that come to mind for the safety position. Again, if they don't go early, I would recommend saying punting on the class entirely and just get what you need out of free agency.
And I know Williams was playing some linebacker at the Senior Bowl, I believe. And so there's that potential hybrid situation, but he may have to go to linebacker more full time. Switching gears, Ross, I'll go to you. Inside linebacker, I think one of the biggest takeaways I have from the combine is that Omar Khan, flatly said that inside linebacker is a position that Pittsburgh has to address, and uncertainty about Cole Holcomb's future and when he'll be available. So my eyes really turn to this inside linebacker group when you have guys like Junior Colson and Peyton Wilson, Tommy Eichenberg. What's sticking out to you among that group of players?
Yeah, Peyton Wilson is obviously, he did a very good job at the Senior Bowl last month. He followed it up with a great combine. What he ended up running a 4.43. So I think he told me at the Senior Bowl his goal was anything below 4.44, and so he nailed it with the 4.43 there. When I talked to him at the combine, I mean, the big thing at the Senior Bowl was him discussing his medicals, and he was anxious to get to the combine so that he could prove to teams that the medicals aren't as big of an issue. And he did end up coming out on time for whatever that's worth. He wasn't held up in medicals. He told me in his interview, he expected to be poked and prodded a whole lot more, and it seemed to go well. It seemed like teams were comfortable with where his medicals were at. And given how well he ran, I mean, I have a hard time seeing anybody else being the top inside linebacker in this class. It was interesting to hear Khan say that the inside linebacker is such a big need, and they didn't actually meet with Peyton Wilson again. And he was a Senior Bowl guy, so we don't know. Maybe they were just trying to cast a wider net there. But yeah, he's definitely impressive. I mean, he won all the awards, every award you can win, he won. And I'm trying to think, another guy, Trevin Wallace from Kentucky is another guy that I spoke to. He's another kind of just freak athlete. He ran a 4.51, I believe. He jumped very well. He's explosive. He is kind of he was also at the Senior Bowl there, and he didn't really catch my eye there, but in the interview he was talking about the ability to cover tight ends specifically. Like he said that's kind of one of his favorite tasks to do. And so, obviously the Steelers have been getting gashed by tight ends for what feels like years now. So he could be an interesting kind of later round guy with that athletic profile. I think he's 6'0", 237. He ran pretty well. He jumped pretty well. And I think he really came on strong his last year there at Kentucky.
Who spent the most time with Edgerrin Cooper at the combine?
That would be me, probably. I went and interviewed him. He said that he spoke formally with the Steelers. He's a guy that just, like, when you pop in the tape and you just see his athleticism sideline to sideline, if you're looking for a linebacker to do that, well, along with Peyton Wilson in this class, that's Edgerrin Cooper, as well as just being able to pad the stack sheet. I think he had like 8 sacks this year, several pass deflections. He really highlighted his game versus Alabama this year. And I know Josh Carney did the draft profile on him, but having watched his tape a little bit before going and speak to him as well too. It just his game versus the Tide does stick out a lot. He's definitely a little more thinner in frame in terms of being 6'2", 230. He's still attested fairly well, ran 4.51, but definitely a guy that will probably be along with Wilson as the top linebacker overall in this class. Again, it just depends on if the age and if the previous medical history of Wilson pushes him down versus Cooper, who is a younger prospect that's kind of continually growing into himself. So he, as Lance Zierlein compared him to Devin Lloyd. I see a lot of comparisons in our last similarities to their games, and Lloyd was a first-round pick. I think Cooper could sneak into the first, but maybe like one of those early second-round players.
And what about the Michigan man, Junior Colson? What's the 4.11 on him? I don't think he did anything testing-wise at the Combine.
Yeah, I spoke to Colson as well, too. He's kind of one of those more prototypical downhill thumpers, just with his size coming at 6'2", 238. He's definitely a guy where his production on the field in terms of the stat sheet with splash plays doesn't really define his game. That wasn't a whole lot of what he had in Michigan, but he was kind of more of that guy that ruled in between the lines of scrimmage and was a little bit better of a coverage linebacker, especially in zone, than credited. He was a very good interview, very well spoken, spoke for him with the Steelers as well, too. He was a guy that kind of reminded me a little bit of Dante Hightower coming out of Alabama, who played a long time with the Patriots. Similar size overall. Hightower's a little bit bigger, but just that guy that, may not rack up all the splash plays, but does well filling against the run, being able to move with tight ends because he has that size. So again, if you're not able to draft a guy like Cooper or Wilson early, I think Colson's, because of his size and because of his youth and just kind of his experience in those big games, I think he's a guy that's going to be around the top of the draft board, especially at inside linebacker.
Overall, is this kind of a underwhelming off the ball class?
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, you have guys like Cooper and Wilson who are solid, but again, they're not bona fide slam dunk first round picks. Then you have guys like Colson, Cedric Gray, who have athleticism and have flashes on tape. And then you have a Jeremiah Trotter, who's very interesting because coming in, like, his size kind of was a big concern for me. And then actually speaking to him, like, I was compared him in the draft profile to Nakobe Dean coming out of Georgia, just because he was a big playmaker as well too for the Bulldogs, but he was also undersized. So, but I thought that, watching Trotter on tape, that he was a little bit more bulkier at that size, right? But once he stood on that podium, like, dude, this guy is small. Like, I was like, nah, I don't know about this, man. And then talking to a couple other of draft evaluators, they're just like, he has the ability to make plays if he's completely clean. But you see a lot of times on tape when he just gets overwhelmed by blockers at the point of attack. So that size is going to be something that he's going to have to battle his entire life. He said that in his interview, but he's definitely a guy that was kind of favored to be maybe a first or early second round pick. The size concerns are definitely going to hurt him.
Yeah, I was going to say for late part of the into the season there, early part of the pre-draft process, he was being linked to the Steelers kind of as a first-round possibility, but it seems like that'd be far-fetched now, right?
100%, 100%.
Okay.
Kind of wrapping things up here, touched on a lot of position groups, a couple that we haven't discussed: quarterback, running back, tight end, outside linebacker, ones of seemingly lesser need for the Steelers, but still to be thorough. Just kind of want you guys to talk about maybe any names that stuck out there. Joe, I'll start with you. Anybody from the quarterback group? And Pittsburgh could take I think a late day 3 kind of guy. Running back, same rule applies there. Tight end, edge rusher. Any thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, guy I talked to a tight end who I liked a lot was Theo Johnson from Penn State. He kind of moved around a lot on tape. He would play in the backfield. He could play in the slot, play in line. He kind of shows everything that a tight end can be. Obviously, Penn State has a history of tight ends with Pat Freiermuth, who's somebody that he's close with. He's talked to him a couple of times through the process. He said when he got there, Pat was kind of the guy, and he always knew that, Pat was a surefire pick. He always knew he wanted to be a draft pick. He's not coming in the way Freiermuth was as a potential first round, second round pick. He's probably more of a fourth, fifth round guy, but he tested pretty well. And just given the way he can kind of move around the offense, maybe could be a guy that Arthur Smith could work with. He was probably the biggest standout from that group when I think of, probably guys who were draftable, but I also talked to Isaac Garendo. I know Mel has an interview with him from the Shrine Bowl that should be coming out, next week or so, maybe. He ran 4.33 at 220 pounds. He was kind of in a split backfield at Louisville a little bit. with Gerard Jordan, and before that he transferred to Wisconsin, where he also played with Braylon Allen. So he's been around a ton of good running backs. He's one of the biggest risers, I think, from this pre-draft process. I think before the Combine Draft Scout had him as like a 7 prior to free agent, maybe. I think he's probably going to solidify himself more as a 4th, 5th round pick. So from that kind of group of positions, obviously quarterbacks, I talked to a couple of guys, and the Steelers didn't express a lot of interest in any of them. Michael Pratt did say that interest in the Shrine Bowl Senior Bowl, talked to him there, but at the Combine wasn't really positionally prioritized. But that skill position group, I would go with Johnson and Garendo as the 2 guys that really stood out to me.
Ross, any thoughts on kind of the remainder of the group?
Yeah, when we got to the tight end group, obviously the Steelers have got pretty full room there. So I was going down the list, just kind of looking, all right, are there any of these guys that might be able to be a fullback? So anyone who's followed along with my posts, I've been high on Jaheim Bell from Florida State. He kind of he wore a lot of hats in that offense. He played H-back, he played a little running back, he played tight end, he played receiver. So he's kind of moved all around. He's smaller. I think he's 6'3" or something like that.
6'2", 241.
6'2", 241. Yeah. So he's kind of profiles more as I guess Connor Hayward's a little smaller than him, but kind of like an H-back or fullback. And obviously with Arthur Smith coming to town, they're going to be making more use of fullbacks. I asked him that question at the Combine and said, hey, are any teams talking to you about fullback? Obviously, it's not a very common position or utilized position these days. And he said yes. So thought that was interesting. He also did have a formal visit with the Steelers, or a formal meeting with the Steelers, rather. And again, he was a Senior Bowl guy, so that's kind of interesting to me because they didn't meet with a lot of those guys from the Senior Bowl. So he was a name. And then at quarterback, somebody that is intriguing to me as a late round option is Jordan Travis, also from FSU. Obviously he had that injury at the end of the year. He was not so good in his first, few years in college. He came on very strong his senior season. He has that mobility that Mike Tomlin talks about, and then just kind of the value of, he hasn't really been viewed as, he's not really been talked about too much in this quarterback class because he hasn't been able to participate in anything. The latest I saw was that he was going to be ready to go by April. So I don't know when their pro day is probably already gone by then, but he's somebody that's interesting just from a value standpoint. Late round, has the mobility, has the kind of pedigree of leading a team to an undefeated season and all that.
And he could set up a private workout after the fact or send that tape out to teams. So there'll be some options for him. Jonathan, just give me quickly 1-2 names of kind of some other names that stuck out to you.
Yeah, so looking at the tight end position, kind of interviewing some guys, AJ Barner and Ben Sinnott. AJ Barner from Michigan and Ben Sinnott from Kansas State both stuck out. AJ Barner being a very good inline blocker who started at Indiana and moved on to Michigan. And then Ben Sinnott was an Iowa guy, actually grew up not too far from me and ended up going to Kansas State. Funny with him, he was a 6-sport athlete. He was a very prestigious hockey player, ended up starting to play tight end for the Wildcats, gradually just became a bigger player over the last 2 years. Was last 2-time Big 12 first team these last couple of years. He's a very good pass catcher. He's played in line. He's played out in the slot. He's played out wide. And another thing, he's also played a lot of H-back and also fullback in their offense. So it's been kind of good to be able. I just did his profile just yesterday. I went up today for the site. So a guy that kind of is another option, say if they look at tight end, just because he has that experience in the backfield, as well as a guy that's continually growing into his body, just being 6'4", 250 at that size. And then another guy, I know that they're probably not going to look at running back just because of the backfield that they have now, but Will Shipley was a very good interview from Clemson. He's a guy that was kind of higher on boards the previous season, and he kind of carried the load for Clemson. This past year, he was in a backfield by committee with Maffa and kind of took second fiddle to that. But again, he was like a 4.0 student in college as well as in high school. He was a multi-sport athlete. Very, very good interview overall. He has a very close relationship with Eddie Faulkner, the running backs coach, with Faulkner offering him his very first scholarship when Faulkner was at NC State. So that was kind of interesting, saying that, they've texted back and forth. They had a really good time catching up again in Indianapolis. So again, just a guy just to kind of keep tabs on. Don't know like if he would actually ever be in play, but just a kind of interesting nugget there.
All right. I think we're going to start winding things up here. But before I do, I'm going to ask this question real slow to give you time to kind of prepare here. And then whoever wants to be the first one brave enough to jump in with the answer, have at it. And then the other two follow here. You have to pick 5 guys at the combine. You cannot double up on the position group, but 5 guys that you could really see being drafted by the Steelers. So it's got to be 5 different positions, 5 different players of guys based on who were at the combine that you could see being drafted by the Steelers. And of course, if you're right on this, we will circle back to it. If you're not, we'll forget it ever even happened. Who wants to go first?
I'll take the shot at this.
All
right. So 5 guys for offensive tackle. I'm going to go Amarius Mims for Georgia. Interior offensive line, I'm going to stick with Jackson Powers Johnson at center for Oregon. Defensive line, I'm going to go Ruko Orohono from Clemson. I'm going to stick with my boy Mike Sanderstill at corner from Michigan. And then, the last one's going to be kind of tough to pick. I would probably say receiver. Yeah, I'm going to go with linebacker Junior Colson. Feels like a Steeler. So those are my 5.
All right. Who wants to go next, Joe or Ross?
I'll go. So I'll throw some different names in there just to switch it up a little bit. For center, I'm gonna go with Hunter Norzad. He had an informal with the Steelers there. Also met with him extensively at the Shrine Bowl. He's a guy that I really like. I got a chance to talk to him a while. Tackle, I'll go the same. I just think Amarius Mims.
Hold on. Tell us a little bit about Hunter real quick.
Yeah, so he's a transfer from Cornell, and when he was at Cornell, he played tackle. So getting to Penn State, he had a kick inside. Well, obviously, and then transitioning from Ivy League competition to Big Ten competition, not easy, but he did it. He held a pivot at Penn State. He's dealing with a lower body injury. He had a boot on. I didn't get specifically into what it was, but at the time I talked to him, he didn't have any formals with anybody, but he had an informal with the Steelers. Obviously, he was aware of their hole at center. He would be. I think he'd be. You get past the Powers Johnson, the Frazier, the top 2. I think he kind of fits right into that second tier of centers in 4th round, 5th round, maybe. He's a guy that I think if they don't get one of those early centers and they do maybe sign somebody in free agency, Norzad could come in, obviously depends on the caliber free agent they sign, but he's somebody that could come and maybe sit for a year and kind of be another longer term solution. So he's a guy I was really happy to talk to. Gave me. I had 4 or 5 minutes with him alone because he was next to a couple big names. So then tackle, I'll go Amarius Mims. Again, just feels like the most likely name at this point. I'll go with a receiver. I'll go with A.D. Mitchell. He seemed to really enjoy his time talking to Tomlin, although I don't think he falls out of the first round. So I don't know if he'll necessarily even be there at 20, but he's a guy I think he could be really, really good in this league. Corner, I'll go Kyrie Jackson, touched on him earlier. And then linebacker, I'd go Tommy Eichenberg. They met with him. Ohio State kid. I just think he's kind of the guy that they may go after if they target a linebacker in the middle rounds.
All right, Ross, bring us home.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this guy, but Max Melton, the cornerback there, I think he is somebody that they could definitely go after. He brings a lot of special teams value. He tested extremely well. I think he had a 40.5 vert or something like that. Very impressive, very explosive. He was impressive at the Senior Bowl. Jaheim Bell, already spoke about him at fullback there, possible converting to fullback. Chris Jenkins, I like the bloodlines. I like the just his attitude in general. He fits a lot of the boxes there. They value those NFL bloodlines a lot, so I think the connection is good there. Ricky Pearsall from Florida. I did his draft profile. He's very interesting to me. I honestly did not foresee him running as well as he did, and so that definitely raises him up a little bit in my mind. I think he ran a 4.41 or something like that. And that was one of the big questions I had on his tape was does he have that long speed? And it looks like he does. He just needs to figure out how to use it a little better. And then Bo Limmer, if the Steelers can't get a center early on, depending on how things fall, I think Bo Limmer is very interesting. He what did he end up with on the bench press? It was some absurd 39. Yeah. So what
were his arms?
Oh, let's see. 31 and 7/8, it looks like. So a little short on the arms.
So he can lift, but he can't feed himself. All right.
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding.
That being said, he what really stands out to me is from back at the Senior Bowl, he went head to head several times against Tavondre Sweat, who's just a total. I mean, what he ran and his overall size, 365 or 66 or whatever it was. He held up very well against him at the Senior Bowl in some of those just one-on-one who can outwill and outstrength the other guy. He showed that strength.
All right, we got to wrap things up here, but great information from all you guys. Again, at the Combine, you are our eyes and ears and window to Indy, and just can't thank you guys enough for Dave and myself, who couldn't be there to have this opportunity, and I'm sure for the readers as well, to really get to learn about these groups, not just as players, but as people as well, and of course, get to hear from Omar Khan as well. So sure to follow all these guys. I'm sure we'll have them back on for a pre-draft show here before April kicks off for the 2024 NFL Draft, but thank you again, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Great job, guys. Appreciate you.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Again, our special thanks to Joe Clark, Ross McCorkle, and Jonathan Heitrader for being out there at Indy, being our eyes and ears, and great interviews with Omar Khan, with the players, a ton of fantastic information there and really good discussion. So thank those three for doing a great job for us.
Absolutely. They did a fantastic job at the Combine. That's not going to be the last time that we have them on. Probably have also Josh Carney and probably Tom Mead and a couple other of our draft profile guys at some point there. But that's a good way to kind of recap the Combine and learn even more about some of these prospects as we got quite a bit of ways to go here before the draft actually gets here. So kudos to them. I enjoyed that, almost an hour conversation, I guess.
Let me just ask you, and this is a long show, as you guys can tell, so might as well just keep it rolling today. Just to go back to the quarterback discussion, just a new thought in my head. What if they don't sign Russell Wilson? What happens then? Are we back to Rudolph returns? And if not, then just veteran Tannehill or equivalent? Is that where this team is at?
Well, it would be interesting once again to see, is all this a dog and, if it's not Russell Wilson, was it a dog and pony show to maybe help drive down a price on Justin Fields? So would Justin Fields potentially be still in the picture, a trade for him? I don't think you could rule it out. Look, if they get Russell Wilson, it's not going to be Justin Fields, right?
Or Mason Rudolph, or anybody else of significance. I mean, they will add a third and add a fourth and obviously go that route, but the competition will be framed as Pickett versus Wilson come camp.
Right. So, yeah, if it's not Wilson, you would have to wonder if they would think about, still dealing for Justin Fields at a really, really reduced compensation price. And if not him, then, yeah, I think you're at Tannehill, Rudolph back, in that territory.
Did sound like, as you mentioned, Omar Khan was speaking to reporters, and I had lost where the quote was at. Khan had spoke with Richie Walsh from KDKA, and his language on Rudolph was a little less enthusiastic as it had been when he spoke about him at the Combine. He said, quote, "We've had conversations. He knows we like to continue conversations to see if something makes sense." And that was kind of the bulk of it, as compared to even a week ago when he said, we want Rudolph back. He knows we want him back. Maybe that's just I'm reading too much into it and just a choice of language there. But, given what we know about Russell Wilson, and Khan obviously knew it at the time that he was giving that interview, it sounds more muted on Rudolph.
Here's the thing. If I'm Mason Rudolph with all this going on right now, I'm saying, call me here in a couple of weeks. Let me see how all this shakes out. he legitimately probably thinks that he deserves a chance to at least compete for a starting job around the NFL. So he's probably not going to get in a hurry right now until the Steelers get past this first wave.
Right. Yeah. Certainly Wilson will have that domino will need to fall before Rudolph does anything. And I don't think I don't think Pittsburgh's calling Rudolph right now until Wilson gives them an answer, and you kind of table the Rudolph stuff and see what Wilson does or does not do and go from there.
Look, here's the thing. And Russell Wilson probably odds are, leader in the clubhouse right now, at least with what's happening in this moment with him heading to Pittsburgh. But this thing could still probably go 4 different ways, couldn't it?
Oh yeah. I'm not going to sit there and say how this thing is going to go.
I'm damn sure not going to nail myself down that this is going to happen. That's going to happen.
No, but I do get just a gut feeling. Again, you put Tomlin in a conversation in the same room as Russell Wilson. I feel like there's going to be good synergy there, good connection there. And even if it's going to be framed as competition, I think Wilson will kind of internally think I'm going to win this job pretty easily. Now, maybe some other team would offer just like flat out, hey, you're our starter. You signed with us in Las Vegas. You're our starter. You're our guy. If he gets that kind of guarantee, maybe that changes things. But money's not going to be really a factor because of the offset. I mean, you're getting paid the same amount of money. I mean, again, there was some debate about financial investment in you as a player, but overall, it'll be about opportunity to start. And unless he gets an ironclad guarantee from somewhere else, I think Pittsburgh makes the most amount of sense for him.
All right, we'll see on Monday if this team has another quarterback in the room.
We shall see.
We would probably do an emergency podcast, I would imagine, if something breaks here over the weekend.
I think so too. Dave, things are kind of fluid right now. You had a post yesterday about the Steelers and cash spending. We'll probably talk about that more Monday when potentially kind of more dust settles, but kind of give us a teaser on that.
Now, look, I know everybody's sitting there waiting for this portion of me recapping cash spending, right?
Mm-hmm. We know how to tease it, Dave. That's our goal here.
Okay. Look, and I knew this post. I'm a nerd. This stuff interests the living, out of me. That's why I wrote it up. The post is not doing very well. I knew it wasn't. But long story short, and we'll talk more about this next week if we have time here. The Steelers in 2023, at least through March 7th, ranked 17th overall in the NFL in total cash spending for 2023. I will toot my own horn here because I predicted almost one full year ago that the Steelers would spend $218 million in cash in 2023. They spent $219.4 million. So I apologize, Alex, to you and everybody listening that I was $1.4 million off. That was my first really educated guess at doing such an exercise. As I did state, though, going way back then, it was cheating to some degree because it was the third year of the 3-year cash spending period. I already knew what they had spent the first 2 years. I knew the 90% rule, what they were likely to spend percentage wise over the 3-year. So that helped shorten the window a little bit, so to speak, for the aiming area for me. But I was still pretty proud that I
you should.
1.4 million off's not bad for Uncle Dave there. But anyway, their cash spending for the 3-year period, at least according to NFLPA data, had them at $597.3 million. That ranked them, believe it or not, last in the AFC in cash spending for that 3-year period. So I don't know how that sits with everybody. There were 9 NFC teams, or who at least by March 7th have spent less in cash than the Steelers did during that 3-year period. So we'll get more into this maybe next week, and we'll start making predictions, which I did a little bit in this post of what we think the Steelers will spend in cash. Look, cash and cap is different, folks. Don't confuse the two. All right. We'll break this all down a little bit more next week there. But cash and cap are two different numbers there. We are talking about cash in this specific situation. So I've bored the people enough there. So if you're into that kind of thing, we'll have more of a conversation next week on that and make some predictions maybe about not only what the Steelers will spend in cash in 2024, but maybe what they will spend specifically in cash when it comes to their own free agents and outside free agents.
Yeah, so look forward to that on Monday. And we'll tease all the if Russell Wilson signs, we'll use that as a teaser for the cash and cap conversation later on Monday's show. But no, it is good information. It's stuff that literally nobody else does. And yeah, it may not be the most popular news of the day, but it's really important. So we thank you for being able to provide that framework. And there are, I think, certainly some people that really appreciate that kind of insight and perspective.
All right. We saved the best for last, maybe. Tell the people about it's unfortunate we're not going to spend a lot of time on it here, but tell the folks about your mock draft offseason annual post that's popular with men, women, children, and dogs.
Especially the dogs, because it's probably used as good just chewing, toilet paper right now or something like that with how the mock off season went. I posted it on Friday this year because I usually post it on Monday, the first day of the legal tampering period, but it's usually kind of gets lost on that Monday because it's so busy.
Thought it was going to be
crazy.
A good news dump.
Yeah. I thought it was like a good Friday, like a quiet Friday. We'll post it and it'll be kind of a thing to talk about. And nope, just the whole going to get railroaded. But that's fine, really, because if you don't know, I put on the hat of Steelers GM through FanSpeak websites or a mock off season simulator of going through free agency and the draft. And I have some fun and kind of go really in depth with it. And this year was pretty bad overall. I did not do a good job. I was a bad GM for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but you can read that whole post on SteelersDepot.com and just, be gentle in your critiques of the job that I did.
All right. How would you rate this as far as kind of previous ones that you've done?
Bad. I don't know where it would be, but it was not one of my better attempts overall. I think the players that I got were decent, but the players and positions I did not address was glaring. I will put it that way. But you can have your own interpretations. I don't mean to, sully the waters here of having you guys prejudge how this exercise goes. But you guys can read it. It's popular, and I appreciate you guys reading it.
Where was the one? Was there one specific moment that it came off the rails in that thing?
Free agency mostly. I didn't get a opportunity to really get Broderick Jones over to left tackle through my draft picks, and I could have done a better job in free agency to not kind of hamstring myself in the draft. I literally was panicking in the draft because I needed more draft picks. I had to trade down, and it's a whole mess. It's a whole adventure, but that's the fun of it. And it's, as I always say, it's done in one take, the good, the bad, and the ugly, no matter how it turns out. It's one shot, and you guys can definitely see that in the post.
So Omar Khan's job is safe, right?
His job, I'm just doing Omar a favor while I'll make him look really good by setting the bar super, super low. So the bill is in the mail, Omar.
Alex, what the hell's left here?
Who knows? I assume 4 seconds after the podcast. I mean, when I joked about them moving to Albuquerque, it may happen at this point because they may actually, who the heck knows what's going to happen right now. But we're on Russell Wilson watch for the next however long it takes for him to decide. So that is where the attention goes. Allen Robinson, we'll see what happens with him. Something will happen with him, I assume, by sooner than later. I guess, there's no roster bonus due with Robinson, though, right?
No.
So they're technically, there's no hard deadline. They have to do something, and they have the cap space right now. So they could wait, I guess, right?
They could, but you would think by the start of the new league year here or a couple of days after, something's going to be done with that because that guy's going to probably want it. Yeah, if they're being cordial and letting some of these other guys out the door, they're probably going to want a decision on him real quick.
Yeah, you're right. And for him and for the team, and just so everyone knows where things are at going forward. A quick pro day information. Seen Pittsburgh, Mark Sadowski at Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois is today. Today's a fairly notable pro day. Illinois got a couple of prospects, Julian Pearl up front, and think one couple of receivers to check out. So we're watching for that. But what's the next major pro day? Do we know what we next week? I assume.
I haven't even looked, to be honest with you, to see.
Yeah, maybe I can just, if I can't find it here, we'll talk about it on Monday. But the pro day schedule has been released. I don't have it pulled up here in front of me right now. Again, the Big 12 is doing that merged, combined pro day later this month, end of March. That'll change things up a little bit. Let's see. March 11th is Oregon State. March 12th is Oklahoma, and Oregon and South Carolina. So those will be the big ones on the docket. We'll see if Tomlin goes somewhere that's right at the start of free agency, and so I'm not entirely sure how that'll be handled. But they'll certainly have scouts and maybe some positional coaches out there as well.
All right. No time for reader emails today. Sorry. You want to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, wrap things up. We'll come back Monday if something does happen. If Russell Wilson were to sign Saturday afternoon, then I assume Dave and I will have an emergency podcast tackling that. But assuming, or if that does not happen, who knows what will happen. We will be back on Monday with whatever the news of the day is. And I imagine there'll be plenty as legal tampering period begins Monday at noon. So Dave, great show. And thank you to Jonathan, Ross, and Joe. And I felt like I run a marathon. I am out of breath. So let's bring this puppy home.
Yeah, I'm tired. And
I'm tired, boss.
I'm tired, boss. 8:30 Pacific time in the morning out here. 11:30 Eastern time when we are wrapping this show up officially. In the meantime, until we'll see what happens over the weekend and whatnot, maybe Monday, follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. A lot of great content, really up, original content, discussion content, news content up on SteelersDepot.com. Hope you make it over that way to see what's going on over there. The team's doing a fantastic job. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button as well. So until whenever the next time is, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.